A new sailor steps aboard a ship the size of a small city and has less than 48 hours to learn how not to die on it. There are over 4,500 people living on a single aircraft carrier. The noise from a jet launch reaches 140 decibels, loud enough to cause permanent hearing damage in seconds. The corridors run for miles. The ship has its own hospital, its own post office, its own power plant, and its own zip code. And on day one, a brand new sailor gets zero hand-holding. What actually happens inside those first 48 hours, and what separates the ones who adapt from the ones who break, is something most people never hear about. Because here's what nobody tells you before you board: the U.S. Navy doesn't give you a week to settle in. It doesn't give you a day. From the moment your boots hit that deck, you are part of an operational warship. The clock is already running. And the first 48 hours test everything boot camp tried to build in you. Stay with us, because what unfolds in those 2 days is one of the most intense human experiences in the entire military. Introduction. The United States Navy operates 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. These are the most powerful warships ever built by any nation in history. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the newest and largest, stretches 1,106 feet long, displaces over 100,000 tons, and costs $13.027 billion to build. It carries its own nuclear reactors, and its kitchen produces 15,000 meals every single day. Now put a 19-year-old kid on that ship for the very first time, fresh out of boot camp, and watch what happens. These young men and women are the backbone of the greatest naval force the world has ever seen. What they go through in those first 48 hours isn't just a transition, it's a transformation. And if you've ever had someone you love serve in the Navy, or if you've worn the uniform yourself, drop proud in the comments right now. Because this story belongs to every one of them. Arriving aboard. Before a new sailor ever sets foot on the ship, the Navy has already assigned them a sponsor. A sponsor is an experienced sailor already serving aboard who is supposed to reach out before the new arrival even gets their orders. They answer questions, help with logistics, and make sure the new person isn't completely lost from minute one. In a perfect world, that relationship starts weeks before the sailor ever sees the ship. But let's be honest, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the sponsor is deployed. Sometimes communication breaks down, and sometimes that new sailor shows up at the pier with a sea bag over their shoulder and not a single familiar face in sight. Here's what arrival day actually looks like. The new sailor must show up in a clean, complete uniform with their original orders in hand, on a carrier enlisted personnel report through what's called the afterbrow, a ramp leading from the pier up to the ship itself, usually connecting to one of the aft aircraft elevators. They don't walk through the main gate, they walk up onto the ship. And it hits them immediately. The noise. The smell of jet fuel and metal and ocean. The vibration under their feet from the ship's machinery running around the clock. And then, the sheer size of it. From the outside, an aircraft carrier looks enormous. From the inside, it feels like being dropped into an underground city with no map and no windows. The very first stop is the personnel office. This is where paperwork gets turned in, pay gets set up, and the sailor officially becomes part of the command. That sounds simple. But on a carrier with over 4,500 people aboard, this process takes hours. There are forms, documents, record checks, and briefings stacked one on top of another. And while all of that is happening, the ship keeps running, jets keep moving, drills keep happening, the world doesn't pause for check-in day. After the personnel office, the new sailor gets their berthing assignment, their rack, their home, and this is where most of them experience their first real shock of carrier life, the rack. On land, a bed is just a bed. On an aircraft carrier, your rack is your entire private world. It's 77 inches long and 27 inches wide. For context, a standard twin bed is roughly 39 inches wide. A Navy rack is nearly a foot narrower than that. You can't sit straight up in it without hitting the rack above you. And you share a berthing compartment, that's the Navy word for sleeping area, with anywhere from 40 to 100 other sailors depending on the ship and your division. The racks stack 3 high. Every sailor has one small storage locker under their mattress. That's it. That is every inch of personal space you own on this ship for the next 6 to 9 months of deployment. The noise in berthing is constant. Pipes run overhead. Air systems hum. The ship never fully goes quiet because the ship never fully stops. Sailors work in rotating shifts around the clock, so at any given moment someone is sleeping while someone else is walking past, someone else is getting dressed, and someone else is getting back from a midnight watch. One important fact that surprises most newcomers: you never, and that means never, sleep without at least shorts or gym clothes on. Because at 3 in the morning, a general quarters alarm can go off. That's the call that means every single person on the ship needs to get to their emergency station immediately. You don't stop to get dressed. You move. And here's something that stops a lot of new sailors cold: the showers aren't next to the berthing compartment. You put on flip-flops, grab your stuff, and walk down the passageway. When you get there, you take what's called a Navy shower. Wet yourself down, turn the water off, soap up, turn it back on, rinse, done. You get roughly 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Not because anyone is timing you, but because the ship produces 400,000 gallons of fresh water per day, and every drop of that water has to be shared across the entire crew. That first night, most sailors don't sleep much. The noise alone makes sure of that. The check-off list and navigation. Day 1 doesn't end after berthing, not even close. Within the first hours of arriving, a new sailor is handed a check-off list. This document is one of the most important pieces of paper they'll carry in those first 48 hours. It requires the sailor to physically walk to dozens of different departments, divisions, and spaces across the ship, get briefed by each one, and get a signature. Why? Because the ship is so large and so complex that the Navy has to force new sailors to explore it intentionally. You cannot learn a carrier by sitting in one spot. Here's how big this ship really is. The USS Gerald R. Ford runs 1,106 feet from bow to stern. It has multiple decks stacked below the main deck, plus several above it. Each compartment has a numbering system stamped on the bulkhead, the ship's wall, that tells you exactly what deck you're on, how far forward or aft you are, and what that space is used for. Sailors call these bullseyes. Learning that system isn't optional. Getting lost on a carrier during an emergency is not a minor mistake. Now here's a question for you, and we really want to know your answer in the comments. If you had to live on a ship like this for 6 months, what do you think would be the hardest part to get used to? Take a second. Think about it. Drop your answer below, because a lot of our viewers have been there, and their answers might surprise you. Back to that check-off list. Among the stops it requires is medical, where the sailor gets a health screening, immunization records reviewed, and a brief on the ship's sickbay capabilities. And the sickbay on a modern carrier isn't just a first aid station. The USS Gerald R. Ford has a full operating room, an intensive care unit, a pharmacy, a clinical laboratory, and an emergency department. 11 medical officers and 30 corpsmen trained in trauma and emergency medicine work aboard it full-time. This floating hospital is prepared for everything from a broken bone to a combat injury. But the most critical stop on that check-off list is damage control. Damage control, the most important lesson. Ask any Navy veteran what the single most important thing a new sailor learns in their first days aboard, and they'll give you the same answer. Damage control. Damage control is exactly what it sounds like. It means knowing how to save the ship and the people on it when something goes wrong. Fire. Flooding. A hit in combat. A burst pipe. An explosion in the hangar bay. A carrier is a steel city operating in the middle of the ocean, thousands of miles from any port. If something goes wrong, the crew handles it. There is no calling for backup. Training in damage control begins back in boot camp, but arriving aboard a carrier means starting over. New sailors are walked through the location of every fire hose station, every damage control locker, and every emergency exit route relevant to their work area and berthing compartment. They are taught how to use an oxygen-breathing apparatus. They learn the difference between a Class Alpha fire and a Class Bravo fire, and which suppressant to use on which. Here's one thing that drives this home immediately. Before a new sailor is ever allowed to go off watch or pursue any free time, they must be able to walk from their rack to their general quarters station completely in the dark. Every single route memorized. Every hatch, that's a doorway with a heavy steel frame. Every ladder, that's what you call stairs aboard ship. Every turn. Because in a real emergency, power can go out. The passageway fills with smoke. You cannot see. And you still have to move fast. Senior sailors don't accept "I'll figure it out" from anyone new. You either know your routes, or you get walked through them again. And again. Until it's locked in. The watchstanding begins almost immediately alongside this. A 4-section watch schedule means a sailor stands roughly 6 hours on watch, comes off, sleeps, eats, trains, then goes back. And that cycle runs every single day, 7 days a week, whether the ship is in port or at sea. There is no Monday to Friday aboard an aircraft carrier. Here's another question worth thinking about, and if you're a veteran reading this, you'll know the answer better than anyone. How many hours of real sleep do you think a new sailor gets in those first 48 hours? Drop your honest guess in the comments. The flight deck, and why new sailors stay away from it. There is one place on an aircraft carrier that every new sailor is desperate to see, and completely kept away from until they've been properly trained. The flight deck. 4.5 acres of steel. FA-18 Super Hornets launching off electromagnetic catapults. Jets catching the arresting wire on landing at 150 miles per hour. Deck crews in color-coded jerseys moving at full speed around aircraft that weigh tens of thousands of pounds. The sailors who work on that flight deck receive monthly hazardous duty pay. That single fact tells you everything you need to know about what happens up there. During flight operations, new sailors are not permitted on the flight deck or the catwalks running alongside it. None. The rule applies regardless of rank. What they're allowed to do is watch through the plat system, a set of cameras covering the entire flight deck, broadcasting on monitors throughout the ship, or make their way up to Vulture's Row. That's a viewing area on the island superstructure, the tall structure rising from the right side of the ship, up around the 9th or 10th level. From there, they can watch aircraft launch and recover without being in the danger zone. But here's what that view does to a new sailor. It doesn't just impress them, it motivates them. Because what they're watching is the entire reason this ship exists. Every department aboard, every watch-standing sailor, every cook, every mechanic, every damage control drill, it all exists to make those aircraft fly. And one day, if they do their job right, they'll be part of that deck crew themselves. That's what those first 48 hours are really building. Not just a person who can survive on a warship, a person who understands why the warship matters. Closing. The men and women who step aboard a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier for the first time carry something most of us never will: the weight of standing watch over a nation while the rest of the world sleeps. In 48 hours, they learn to navigate a floating city. They memorize emergency routes in total darkness. They learn to sleep in a rack the size of a coffin with 100 people around them. They begin standing watches that never stop, on a ship that never stops. And they do all of it without complaint. Because they chose this. One final question before you go, and this one's for everyone watching. Do you think the average civilian could survive even one full week aboard an aircraft carrier? Tell us in the comments. The answers might just change how you think about the people wearing that uniform. If this video gave you something, if it made you respect these sailors even 1% more, then like this video and subscribe to this channel right now. Every click helps us keep telling the stories of the men and women who defend this country. and there are a lot more of those stories left to tell.